4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, we have them all. I don't know, there's Craig, okay. I just want to make sure that all the board members are on the first page, right? It's like, yeah, because I was missing Craig and now I see him.
Okay,
Okay. Is it time?
yes.
All right. Call the meeting to order. It's 6:31. Please stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
United States of America.
Republic
The republic for which it stands,
of God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
and justice for all.
Okay, public forum. There's
Yep, there's Kevin. So I have to find Kevin. All right, until
I did see him earlier.
you did?
Yeah.
He can unmute himself if you're going to let him speak.
Yeah, if we, okay, here you are, Kevin, go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to address the board briefly. I wanted to mention, make sure you all knew how all the departments and the principals have been working very hard together to keep the school safe and open. You know, as you're aware, we did have a couple COVID cases hit our school district. And I wanted to bring to your attention the speed at which the district reacted to the positive cases. The students and the staff were immediately quarantined. The faculty reacted in a manner that was unparalleled. They switched to remote learning without a glitch and with very little notification. They continued their constant professionalism and put our students first. I also have to compliment the staff that continued to come to work despite their anxiety and their fears. Some of them are immunocompromised. Some of them are caring for elderly, high-risk parents. And despite their worry for themselves and their loved ones, they came to work. Not only did they continue to teach their own classes, but they spent many hours covering for the staff that had been quarantined. I just wanted to express to you that I'm immensely proud of all our staff, and I'm encouraging you to be as well. Thank you.
Kevin, I just want to say something. I am very proud of this school. I tell everyone about the great things that everyone here is doing. And, you know, people are in envy of us, actually. So thank you. All right. Anybody else for public forum?
Not at this time?
Okay. So I need a motion for the acceptance of the agenda for tonight. Can I have a motion, please?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
I'll second it.
Who's that?
Terry?
Heidi, is that you?
Oh, I think it was Terry, but I you.
All right,
sorry.
I'm going back and forth between two big screens here. So
Sorry.
Are there any questions on the agenda for this evening? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. All right, so now I need a motion for the acceptance of the consensus agenda, please.
I'll make that one also.
Okay, Dave, and second,
Joe.
okay. Any questions on the consensus agenda? There's, let's see, just go through we have a resignation, 2 resignations. We have, let's see. Resignations for the civil service job, right?
Yeah.
Hey, Bonnie,
Yes. Yes, Greg.
is the salary increase for the substitutes and the naming of the substitutes part of the consensus agenda, or is that new business?
On new business.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any questions on the consensus agenda? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. There's no presentations at this time. So now we're going to go to reports. The superintendent's report, Dr. Neil Howard.
Okay, folks, thank you for joining us tonight. We're still experimenting, and the The first is I would like to echo Mr. Reese's words. We're doing extremely well. I've talked with many parents, many community members over the past month since our last meeting, and we are the jewel of Columbia County. Of what we're doing and how we're doing it. I can't tell you the positive comments. Doesn't matter where I go in the county. They think that we're doing just a great job all the way around. So I would like to update the board because at the last meeting, there was some questions about the number of kids on remote and in person. We have 74.7% in person, 25.3% remote at this time. And of course, that fluctuates as we let children and parents update their decision-making, but we try to steer them in certain directions based upon how we feel the kids are reacting to remote or in person. So what that looks like at the pre-K through 6th grade is that there's 487 kids in person and 123 remote. And 7th through 12th grade, that's 408 in person and 178 in remote. Okay, and that's all I have for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Neil, am I unmuted? I can't.
Oh, yes, you're unmuted. I'm sorry, Dave. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
no. I wasn't sure if I unmuted myself. The screen is kind of cluttered with so many,
That's the only thing.
trying to look at the agenda also on my own. With the remote, are the students in classes that are the whole classes remote, or are these students in hybrid?
It really varies, David. So some classes are, most classes are not.
So most classes are, I'm not sure which, most classes are hybrid or most classes are pretty much all remote.
Well, it really depends. So I guess to better answer the question, why don't I let the principals address that in their reports? Because it does have a significant, I guess,
Fair enough.
between the junior high, the elementary, and of course, the senior high school.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah, I do have a question regarding our COVID response. And I'm glad to hear from everyone that the district has been very proactive, and we've been able to identify and isolate. In any of the cases where there was someone who was COVID positive, and we had to have students or other faculty members or staff members self-quarantine for, I would assume, 14 days. Has anybody who had come in contact ended up being COVID positive themselves?
Not at this time, but one of the phrases you used is a phrase that I'm told that the Department of Health does not like to use, and that's self-quarantine. They tell me that you're either in quarantine or you're not. So that's the Columbia County Health Department making those determinations.
I appreciate that, and clearly the Department of Health says mandatory quarantine and in all of their releases.
Okay. All right. That it, Dave?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right, now we have the building reports. We have John Gould, same elementary school. Hey, John.
Don't hear you, John.
Okay, hang
There you
on.
go.
You can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'll address David's concern first, Mr. Whalen, about the nature of the classes. So I'll just go right through the grades for you. Pre-K, most of the students are in person. There's maybe one or two in a couple of the classes that are joining remotely. Kindergarten is completely remote. We have a dedicated remote class
Wow.
And all of those kids are remote. Kids who have returned in kindergarten from remote have been placed in those classes that teach in person. First grade is the same. It's up until just a couple of days ago, it was completely remote. We do have one student now that has returned in person, and the decision was made to put that child in with the remote teacher. So that individual has about 14 or 15 kids on remote and one student in her classroom at this time. Second grade is completely remote. Again, any student that's returned to us in second grade, we've been able to find places for them in the in-person classes, and that made sense for those children. Third grade, up until this past week, was completely remote. I do have one child in the remote class in person. Fourth grade, both the fourth grade classes, which are completely remote, now have students returned to them, one in one of the fourth grade classes and three in the other fourth grade class, with a fourth one planning to join us after the Thanksgiving break. So again, we haven't been able to hold the line completely on having dedicated remote classes. I mentioned to you in places where it was tight in terms of trying to find locations for kids in person, we are putting those kids back in to the remote class. And the teachers have been real troopers about it and making do.
For the most part, teachers that are dealing with remote students aren't having to, for the most part, they're not having to balance both remote and in person at the simultaneously.
Well, as I outlined to you, it hasn't been terribly burdensome because it's just been a couple of kids either in person or remote, with the majority of the kids in the other direction. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Thank
But yeah, you know, it's challenging, no question about it, especially with little ones.
Yeah, sure.
So you know, we try to offer as much support as we can to them, including rerouting some aid support as available.
Can I ask a question? Have you gotten feedback? Are the parents actually sitting with the kids, the little ones, especially all day while they're, or with?
Yeah.
I can imagine that's really challenging.
Yeah. So Terry, that's a good question. I would have to tell you that some of the parents who have been doing that in the first quarter are now beginning to send their kids to us because I think they've really found that extremely challenging.
It is.
As we described to you, as we planned for the fall, this remote option this year is not what we did in the pause. This is a much more labor-intensive, long day that mirrors the instructional day in person. So some parents are finding that quite the challenge.
I can imagine. I do therapy, teletherapy, and like 45 minutes, you know, my little ones, they're gone. And that's with the parents sitting there.
Yeah.
So it's got to be tough. Thank you.
All right. You're welcome. I just want to draw to your attention to two kind of fun things that we've been able to do, even though, you know, we've talked about how abnormal this year has been. We were able to do a costume parade for the children. It was a virtual parade. Kudos to Ryan Proper for helping put that together. Kids sent in pictures who were home with their families. And then, of course, we had pictures taken of kids in school. We strung those together, put them to some fun music, and that was available. Hope you've had a chance to take a look at that. The kids enjoyed doing that. The other thing is, although we could not have the veterans assemble with us like we always do, we enjoy that so much, and they do. We did have children make some nice greeting cards for them and thank you notes. And I put a little letter together and we mailed those out to our veterans. And I've got some nice feedback from folks who received those letters. So again, although we can't do what we normally do and celebrate wonderful things, we're still trying to find ways to do so. I also want to say just quickly, school picture day went very well at the elementary school. We were able to provide pictures for the students who are in person during the day, and then take pictures of kids who are on remote learning after hours. And although the remote students didn't show up in great numbers, those that did seem very appreciative. So we found, again, we're finding ways to make things work and keep as much normalcy in our students' lives as possible.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions for John? Okay, next up, we have Mary D'Amico, the International School. Hi, Mary.
Hi. So to answer Dave's question, in grades 5 and 6, we originally, so this is how it started. We originally assigned teachers to teach the remote for English, math, and science, so that we could keep our teams that were in person in school with those students that were in person. However, as things continue to adjust and readjust, the quarantines have made it a little more challenging. So we do now have a small amount of students that might be in different in-person classrooms that are working remotely. And we did that because we were trying to maintain some continuity for the students. So we are keeping them with their class, and they should be returning in 14 days or whatever the time frame is. With 7th and 8th grade, it's a little different because they're subject teachers. So we have a section of remote for each of those teachers. And that worked very well for a while. But again, as students start to come back to school, and that's really what we're starting to see, we do not have the physical space to put some of those students in classrooms. So we are now putting the kids that are returning in person, they are entering the remote classes. And, I always let the parents know your child will be, it's a very small number in a social studies class. I think we're up to 3 in person. And at this point, they're pretty much like, whatever you need to do, they just need to come back to school. So they've been very accepting and very happy about all of it. So we're doing the best we can. The only real issue in 7th and 8th is that our specials teachers, our CTE teachers of that nature, they're really high, some of the high school classes kids might take, it just becomes an impossibility to have remote sections of all of those. So they have more of a blended approach than the other teachers do. And they're doing a wonderful job. I mean, Kevin is right. I mean, we've really been adjusting and readjusting on the fly. And I think that everyone, for the most part, has done a very nice job. And we appreciate that. The only thing I have to report is that the first quarter has officially ended. So we have completed our first quarter in person, which I'm pretty amazed at. And report cards will be going out.
May I have a question, please? In terms of quizzes and writing tests, anything that's happened in the first quarter, are your teachers concerned about where students are progressing? Is there slippage? Are people falling behind?
So are you?
Linda, Sandra's going to touch on that in her report, and she'll be able to give you some information at that time.
Okay.
All right.
Mary, did you want to say something or?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Thank you.
James Burmaster of the high school. Hi, Jim.
Hi, everybody. So yeah, to get right to Dave's question, we're in the high school where all of our classes are blended classes, just with the, trying to have a schedule that fits for students, whether we're in remote, all in person or a hybrid model. The only way we could accomplish that with that many electives and that many different options for students was to do mixed classes. So each teacher has, a maximum number of students, and some of them have a high percentage of students that are in person and a small amount remote, and other classes might have a little bit more remote than in person. So each class looks a little bit different, but our teachers have been good, since day one at figuring out how to handle these blended classes. We actually, Darby DeLee, our assistant principal, did a survey with all the remote students to try and get some feedback from them as to what works and what doesn't work. And we got a lot of great feedback. We've been able to use that with the teachers to try and improve our instruction. improve the way we're, reaching these kids. The IT department with John and his staff has been awesome at, fixing any kind of problems that students have immediately, or sometimes even debunking some of the problems that the students are telling their parents that they have, which is not completely uncommon. The one area where we're struggling with, which, I think all schools are at the same time, is attendance. With remote kids, we have minimum amounts of time that they need to be participating and engaged with the class to be counted as there. So it is a struggle with some kids that we think should be back in school, but their parents have chosen remote, and we'll respect that decision and work with them. But it's a little bit more difficult if they're not engaging every single day. We have had a decent amount of kids come back. The same thing that Mary mentioned, some that are like, my kids just need to be there. They're struggling so much at home, find a way to get them back. And we're welcoming them with open arms. But, with the scare that we had in the high school with the one case and the uptick in cases around the country, we've also had some families make the decision to kind of pull their kids back and do the remote. But whenever they do, we're just trying to be as clear as possible that you've got to be engaged. You've got to be on for all your classes. And it's not the same situation that we had last year. We're requiring a lot more, and that's the only way we're going to keep these kids up to speed and give them the education that they deserve. One other little side note that I'll throw in is just, some good news. Didn't get to mention it at the last meeting, but we're always looking at our graduates, current graduates, and students that are there right now for good news. And we actually had a national award. Hunter Gardner was awarded with the FFA Star Award, which was given out to only 4 students in the Eastern States. It was a huge honor. It's a cumulative award for the work he had done in FFA. Really, the things that supported him are the things that you as a board have been really good at supporting our district with. The agriculture program has built up and is sustainable now. We have a greenhouse that's going to take it to new heights. Hunter also got a lot of work and a lot of great experience through the science research program, which 3 years with Linda Hopkins and being able to use that scientific method and dig into problems and offer solutions. And we see that just even growing even more with the ability to now do labs in 5th and 6th grades with teachers down there. So the investments that you've approved, both capital and human capital, have been very beneficial to our students. And it's nice to see some of the acknowledgments from outside organizations to our students. Thanks.
Thanks, Jim. Next up, we have the Sandra, instructional staff development.
Ashley, are you going to be able to share the screen?
Yep, I'm pulling it up right now.
Thank you.
And Sandra's got to be unmuted.
Sandra, try to unmute yourself.
There
you
she
go.
is.
So good evening. I would just like to follow what Jim said with a thank you with both my curriculum hat and instruction hat on and as a parent for your investment in our children. It really does pay off. Tonight, we're going to talk about an investment that we've made through the NWA MAP assessment. As you know, we decided to purchase this assessment many years ago. I believe year 9 of using this assessment. It tends to be very parent friendly as far as providing parents results. And they've come a long way from the time that we started using them 8 years ago as a company. And they recently updated their norms. So tonight I have really, I feel very good news across the board for our district. These are based on the 2020 norms. And what you are looking at is results from the fall of 2019 testing to the fall of 2020 testing. So how our students did within a year, but it is a fall to fall measurement. What's nice about that is that takes in the time period we were on the pause. So we can look and see how our students did for a whole year's worth of time. That takes in the pause time due to COVID. So quickly, the gold diamonds show where students are nationally in their growth on the NWA. And the bar shows where our students are on their growth from fall 2019 to 2020. And if you look here, last year's kindergarten class is now this year's first grade class. When they tested this fall, they exceed the growth rate in mathematics because they were above the gold diamond. We also had the same thing happen at second grade. And at third grade, they're right on that. Fourth grade, they are lower. Fifth grade, they are above it. And sixth grade, on the diamond, but a little bit lower. So you can see that our students fared pretty well, even with the COVID pause, at keeping their growth up. So that's kudos to our teaching staff and our administrators in really working, as well as the parents at home. So we often hear what happened during the pause. Well, something good happened, obviously, to maintain that growth. I'd like to remind you that when I presented this data last winter, all the grade levels had met or exceed the growth in all subject areas. So we did have some regression, but not major regression in mathematics. Ashley, would you move to the next slide, please? Here is language arts, specifically reading. And if you look again, in grades 3, 4, 5, and 6, we met or exceed national norm for growth in the RIT score. In first and second, we had some gaps. I think that's to be expected. We really struggled with meeting students' needs at those younger grade levels because they did not have the technology skills that our older students had. And we were using a lot of packets. So reading did seem to suffer where math did not suffer as much at those 2 grade levels. Ashley, would you move to the next slide, please? Here is our language usage. That is punctuation, grammar, those kinds of things where the previous language arts was reading. And we start testing that at 3rd grade. So here we go. 3, 4, 5 at or above the national norm. 6th grade, a little bit below. And Ashley, the next slide. We did not do science in grades K through 5 here, so we're going to move on to the next slide. Here is 7th and 8th graders, current 7th and 8th graders again, and they are below, so this is where we need to do work. This was not a surprise to us because this is something that we have seen through our data year after year. This is where we are working with the state on our SEP plan in mathematics at grades 7 and 8. Here is grades 7, 8, and 9 for reading. And 8 and 9 fared very well, as you can see. And 7th grade, we do have a gap. And language usage follows the same as reading. 8th and 9th grade did well. 7th grade, there is a gap. Another area of concern is our science. 7th and 8th grade did have a gap in science. So we have been able to identify where regression occurred. We will be working on that, and we will monitor again in the winter testing.
Sandra?
Yes.
When you speak to that you've identified where the regression has occurred or where the growth hasn't occurred,
yes.
Is there any correlation with kids who are on remote versus kids who are in person? Or is it just, you know, across the board?
So that's a good question, Gabe. At this point, the testing window ended on Friday. So I have not had a chance to that data, but what we did do today is our 7th and 8th grade teachers for mathematics worked with our math coach from Questar, and they looked at those results and I began identifying skill sets for remediation and work with the students in their curriculum planning.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Linda, did you have any other questions? Did that answer your question?
So I was wondering, these are our students against their previous performance?
So it's measuring the growth that the students had from fall of 2019 to this current fall. So how much academic growth did they make in their RIT scores as compared to the academic growth that students nationally made in their RIT scores? So it could be a school in, let's say, Oregon that did not pause. They had a full school year, unlike us who stopped normal school, as we would call it, in March.
Right, but it's looking at all schools that are suffering through the COVID plague. Yes?
Right, like we all are right now. However, New York was one of the first states hit with the COVID, and we're one of the few states to have to pause their educational programming in March. So when you think about that, I think we've done really well.
No, I understand that. I just think of the loss for all school kids over a 2-year period, whether
Right.
it's going to affect education.
And we won't know that, Linda, because these are new norms with NWA. So these norms are based on typical growth from their statistical analysis. So these norms are based on data prior to any COVID experience.
And also, can I just ask, if this started in the fall of 2019, so the kids got at least 6 months of regular or normal learning as opposed to remote, is that correct? Is that?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so it's only the second half of the year.
Right, and remember, in winter, we were doing very well. We had great scores with really all grade levels and all subject areas meeting or exceeding the norm. So there was somewhat of a drop off from where we were in winter, but overall, when we look at the whole picture, I think we're looking very strong.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a couple of questions, please.
Thank you. This is very helpful. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Craig.
I have a couple of questions, please.
Certainly.
First of all, what's the baseline? In other words, if our kids, and I know they're not, but I'm just making this up, okay? If the kids are in the bottom 10% nationally, and they're just keeping pace with growth, and that's not good enough. If the kids are in the top 10% and they're keeping pace with growth, that's phenomenal. So I think this has to be, and I don't know where our kids are in comparison. We just see the growth, we don't see the baseline. So can we see that? Like, do we have a lot to make up, or are we already way ahead? And that would put this growth in a much clearer perspective. And the second question, I'll just give you both up front, is, and I think I've asked this before, I think it's be useful to get a comparison against New York schools, or at least non-New York City New York schools, because school systems and educational systems are so varied across the country. There are some states that have very, very poor educational systems. I think New York has one of the better educational systems. So to do just a US base, it would be much more interesting to see a New York comparison. So the two questions are, again, what's the base that we're coming off of, and how does this compare against New York schools?
Can I just say something? Because if you look at the statistics of reading levels in the kids in New York, they were functioning at 55% below average in reading in terms of New York State before all this COVID stuff started. So we weren't you know, doing well across the state as far as reading is concerned. And that's just a, you know, local, that's a recent statistic.
So,
So to have average growth when we're very far behind, I would say is a bleaker picture than what this represents, because this represents average growth, but we're starting from much further behind. Anyway, Sandra, please comment if you would.
yes, certainly. The first piece, as comparing to New York schools, unfortunately, Craig, at this time, NWA does not have a norm for just New York State. So I cannot give you that kind of data because I don't have a statistical figure to work off of. So if they change that ever, I will let you know and certainly present that way. But at this point, I don't have that ability to do that. I do have the ability to follow a predictor correlation study with NWA that says, you know, if a student gets this risk score, how likely are they going to be successful at proficiency level on the New York State exam. So we do look at that, and we look at students specifically on that to help us understand where we need to provide, again, remediation and support, as well as, you know, which students are at proficient, but could we move them to mastery? So we use that data, but as far as a statewide norm, I don't have that ability to provide that to you until NWA does that analysis themselves. I haven't heard that they are planning to do that. I think that would be fiscally driven based on how many using NWA. There has been some thought that maybe NWA would become the New York State assessment, but I have not heard that in the last year or so. As far as looking at where our students stood, if we refer back to the winter data, when I presented the winter data, again, most of our grade levels and subject areas were at the national norm for performance achievement level. That analysis will also be done as we have more time to work with the data that we just finished up collecting on Friday. And we will take a look at that, and I'm certainly glad to present that chart to you again. But it's just not ready yet at this point. But in the winter of 2019, we were standing very well. Typically, what I do see is most of our kindergarten classes, cohorts come in, and they are coming to us below the national norm. So we have already, before they come to Taconic Hills, a gap that we need to address.
Mm. Yeah.
Okay, so Ashley, if you could go back. Thank you.
Okay. Andrew, your report was done?
Unless there's more questions.
Okay, any more questions for Sandra?
No, but congratulations with
Is there any way to get a baseline on New York's, even if you don't use this particular study, is there any way to get a baseline and in a comparison to New York State? And not a national baseline?
Craig, let me jump in on that for a second. So Sandra's pretty much explained that NWA really can't afford or can't give us the data you're looking for, but I have a sense that you want to know where our kids stand, not just how much growth they're making, but where they actually stand, right? I think that's what you're drilling down to. And in that standing, are we behind? Are we where we need to be? Or do we even exceed in some cases? So there are other assessments that we can look at. One of those in the area of reading would be the Fountas and Pinnell reading assessments that we give. That determines what reading level a child is at. And we know what level they should be at, what would be an advanced level and what would be below level. So that's information that we can get in real time to see where our kids stand. Our challenge with that assessment at this point is we've got a lot of kids on remote, right? And so it would be a very hard thing to administer remotely. But I feel like what you're looking for is where are our children vis-a-vis where they should be? Not how much growth, but where are they in terms of where they should be? Am I reading?
Exactly. Exactly. And if, again, if they were right where they should be and we're hitting average growth, then I'd say that would be fine.
Yeah.
But if they're above where they should be and we're hitting average growth, that would be phenomenal.
Yeah.
But if they're
So-
below where they should be and hitting average growth, then that's an issue.
We know from our winter 2019 data that students were at where they should be compared to the national level.
Right, national, but I don't think
We
national
know-
is, I don't think national is a good measure.
I think all children are at a reduced growth because of what's happened. And I think the entire country ultimately is going to have to deal with the fact that students have missed something over this year or so of this plague. And schools may have to invent something like a 13-year path toward graduation for kids to make up for what they've missed. I mean, you just can't make up for missing out of months and months and months of school. I mean, it's not our school, it's all schools. I'm not blaming this school. I'm saying we're doing okay compared to other schools, but other schools aren't doing okay either.
Yes, but Linda, I just want to remind you that gold diamond was based on the national norm prior to COVID. That was the recently released norming data that NWA has determined through their statistical analysis before COVID.
Let me ask John Goulsane, you say that this other method is hard to administer because of our current COVID situation, and makes a lot of sense. Had we done such an analysis in the previous year before we had this situation? And if so, where did our kids stand in terms of New York, not US?
Yeah, so again, that Fontes and Pinnell assessment would give us an idea where the kids are relative to where they would be. And again, that's normed, not just New York State. That would again be like a nationwide norm they come up with. You know, for example, at the end of kindergarten, you want kids to be reading at a C and approaching a D level type of idea, right? So then coming into first grade, you want them at a D and then move them along. If a child is in second grade and is reading at a D level, then we know that they're basically 2 years behind, and that's a concern. So that's what I'm talking about in terms of getting that barometer of where they are against where they should be. Craig, I know you want to know how we're doing in New York. Unfortunately, these assessments are not New York based. They're nationwide.
And there are not other assessments that we could be doing that is New York based.
Well, you have your New York State testing program that we've gone through multiple presentations. We did 2 on that last year. Obviously, that testing program didn't happen this past spring, so we won't have new data until that happens, Craig. And at this point, there are thoughts that that won't happen again this spring.
Well, that's very understandable for obvious reasons. And my recollection from those is that we were below New York.
We are below New York. We have areas of strength and we have areas of deep assessment.
Yeah. Okay. I appreciate the information. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you, Sandra. Sybil, business office.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to yield my time tonight to Eileen Olson. She's joining us to do her first tax collector report after her first successful season. She's done a fantastic job for us this year. As you know, we've had a lot of transition in the district office since the summer, but everything has smoothed out and we're doing quite well. But I did just want to let you know that Dr. Howard and I are keeping our eye on information that's coming out of SED, and you're probably seeing it if you're watching your news feed about possible transportation aid deduct because we did not transport students after March 16th last year. This in the final preparations of the 2021 budget cycle, and we did anticipate a potential 1/3 reduction in our transportation aid. So we have our eye on that. They're looking at changing the regulation that districts could still get aid based on the time that they spent delivering meals, delivering homework, delivering the contents of lockers at the end of the year, different school supplies that kids needed to do their work, laptops, all of that work continued here at Taconic Hills. So, you know, financially we are prepared, but that is something that we foresaw in the spring, and it's a very possible reality in the next couple of months as the state aid runs come out around January 15th. That's it for me.
One quick question about that. Do you have a dollar figure that 1/3 would be about?
I do, about $413,000.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
Thank you. Well,
Sure.
I can't thank you for that. That's a big number.
Hey, Eileen, you're up. Hi, how are you?
Hello. So everyone, I started as tax collector on August 24th, and basically tax bills went out on August 31st, so I had to hit the ground running. So right here's the PowerPoint slide that you can look at the little numbers. I'll go with the big numbers as talking. The board approved a levy of $25 million. And then what we get reimbursed STAR, which is around $983,000, which is people that get STAR. The state will reimburse us around the end of January, beginning of February. So that lowers it down to, gives us $24 million of a tax warrant that I needed to collect from the taxpayers between September 1st and October 31st. So between September 1st and September 30th, that is the non-penalty phase. And we received around $17.6 million in that time. Then from October 1st to October 31st is the penalty phase where people get charged 2% penalty. We received $4.6 million at that point. So a total of $22 million was collected, which is 92% of the tax warrant that we were looking for. So out of that, it was $1.9 million that was uncollected that I have now turned over to Columbia County Treasurer. They are collecting till the end of November with the 2% penalty still attached. And from there, they will charge a 7% penalty, put it on the town and county taxes in January. We do get reimbursed 100% of that $1.9 million at the end of April. So even if they don't collect it from the people, we still get reimbursed from the county. So people can pay their taxes two ways. They can pay online or they can pay through the KeyBank Lockbox service. And the board was so gracious to actually approve the service charge fee to be waived for the people. And the service charge fee this year was $50,000, which last year it was $34,000. So it was an increase of about $16,000, but online payments also increased by 8% from last year. The KeyBank Lockbox, which is up in Albany, the service charge for that was $11,000 this year, and last year was $13,000, which was a decrease of about $1,500. But that was the opposite. It was a less percentage by 8%. So basically, people went online 8% to pay more, where they didn't mail their check 8% less. So our penalties collected, though, this season between October 1st and October 31st was $21,000. So if you take that and subtract it from the credit card service fee, it gives us around $29,000 that the school did have to absorb in service charges. One other information that's out there, our school has the largest amount of parcels in Columbia County. We have 9,188 parcels of land out there. The second closest is Hudson with 7,000. So if you take that, the average bill was around $2,634 per person, which can go up or down based on land and size. So I think that's about it. If anyone have questions?
I've got a quick question.
Sure.
With the STAR,
Yeah.
the state seems to be changing over the last few years to, instead of the STAR being deducted directly from a resident's school taxes, the state seems to be pushing and encouraging people to do the rebate directly from the state.
Correct. So people would then we then get the full amount on the tax bill. So when people get the STAR reimbursement, their tax bill is lowered by the amount of STAR that they receive. Average around $350. So we receive less and then we get reimbursed later on. But if they get the check in the mail, we get all of it. So their tax bill is actually higher.
Right. Okay. So do you know when they've received STAR directly?
Nope, on my system, it just shows that they get a check. So that's completely up to New York State to issue them their check in the system that they have.
Yeah, no. Well, maybe you are saying what, so you know that the state has issued some sort of check for STAR, but you're not aware of the amount that they've given people.
Correct. I do not know the amount and I don't know when. I just know that they do get a STAR. Like I can see at this situation, there is a STAR rebate and either I see the STAR rebate right on my system or I see that the STAR rebate is given by check, but I don't know the amount.
Okay, thank you. That clarified it to me.
Yep.
I have two questions.
Congratulations. These look like great numbers to begin the year with.
Yeah, it was a lot to learn, but yeah, it worked out. Learned quick. Go ahead, Craig.
I have two questions, please. First, does the 2% and the 7% penalties flow to the school? And the second question is the percentage of people that haven't paid yet, how does that relate to the percentage of people that didn't pay last year? Is it getting worse? Is it getting better?
Actually, the amount that we collected is the exact same amount as last year. 92% we collected this year and 92% was last year. So when I did the numbers today, it actually worked out the same. So there was no difference of the amount collected. The 2% does come to us. That is the $21,000 that we received in late fees. The 7%, I think Columbia County, they take that because they tax it onto their tax bill in January, but I don't know for sure how that one works.
We still get 2% of the 7%, and then Columbia County gets the difference then, right?
Correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Is that it? All right, thanks.
Thank you, Eileen. Next up, do we have Stella here?
Stella got a flat tire on the Deconic guys,
Oh.
so she's not present.
Oh, no. Geez, I hope she's okay.
Yeah, a state trooper was helping her
Oh,
change a
good,
tire.
Okay, so now Nick's, I know I saw, oh, there's Nick. Hi, Nick. You're up.
Okay. So I'll be brief. The work has started on the shoulder season boiler that was approved at the last meeting as a alternate to the project. So the contractors have been on site working on that in the boiler room for the past couple of weeks. The greenhouse project is coming to a close and we plan on having training for the buildings and ground staff tomorrow on the greenhouse environmental controls. I know that Mr. Burmaster mentioned the greenhouse earlier, so that's just about wrapped up. And I just wanted to thank the board for approving the substitute for the buildings and grounds department this evening. The appointment will be helpful when we have absenteeism and we have to make up for shortages. So we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Anybody got questions for Nick? All right, thanks, Nick.
Thank you.
Next up is, where is he? Do I see him? There he is. Hi, Rick.
Good evening, everyone. So it goes without saying that this is a year filled with changes and the need to be flexible, and we're getting a lot of that on a daily basis. We are receiving a lot of schedule changes from our out-of-district schools almost daily, but we're staying ahead of that. We're also getting a lot of changes from students who either wish to go to remote or wish to come back to school. And we're dealing with that and making those all work. We still have room on the buses, so life is good. That's about all I have to report. We're very busy.
Any questions for Rick? All right, thanks, Rick. We got, next up, we have technology, John Dodds.
Yes, good evening. Just want to thank Mr. Burmaster for the kind words, and thank you to the IT department for keeping these computers and technology going at Taconic Hills. I have nothing else to report.
Thanks, John.
Way to go, John.
Next,
I have a brief question for Mr. Dodd.
sorry, Dave.
Yeah, I know that there was a concern for students that were remote and may not have had internet access. Where do we stand with that? Are all the students who are remote able to connect?
Currently, everyone that is remote is connected and working. We have 14 hotspots that are available. Most of them are being used right now. And there are special deals with Consolidated and Spectrum to get lines run if the student lives in their zone.
Is anything happening maybe with Mid Hudson for the kids who were in those areas?
I have not got a connection with them yet, but we don't have that many.
I'm not sure. I know the neighborhood that I live in is predominantly Mid Hudson and
Okay.
very spotty. So don't know how many students actually would be affected. The recent outages that the district had with the phones, is that associated? It wasn't interrupting internet. It was just phone services.
Correct. We have a PRI phone system that comes into us, a PRI connection, excuse me, and we have an internet connection. So there are two different connections, and Consolidated is working on fixing the phone so it is more reliable.
Yeah. Oh, I know on top of everything, that's the last thing you need. So my condolences.
Thank
you.
Next up, Pam Strunk, cafeteria.
Hi, everyone. We have been all week cooking and cutting turkeys, getting ready for our Thanksgiving lunch tomorrow, which is quite a big undertaking because everything has to be packed up in containers, individual containers for each student, and then put on many different carts and brought to the students while still trying to keep it hot. So I just want to say that everybody in the department's been working really hard. The girls are very tired at the end of the day, but our participation is increasing slowly, but it's headed in the right direction. And that's basically where we are at now. Any questions?
Any questions for Pam? Thanks, Pam.
You're welcome.
Okay, that ends the reports. We have no old business at this time. So we're going to go into new business. We have two donations. We have music and math supplies from the Alvarez family. It's a saxophone, calculator, and some other calculators. And then music supplies from Denise Blank, and saxophone and drum kit. Can I have a motion, please?
I'll make that motion.
I got Joe and Dave second. All right. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Next up, we have the authorization of disposal of obsolete or surplus equipment and supplies consisting of 2 touchpads and 7 Colorado timing system scoreboard panels. Could I have a motion, please?
I'll make that motion.
Dave, second. Joe, any questions on that? All in favor? Okay. Linda? Okay, thank you. We have the Board of Education hereby establishes the 2019-2020 tax cert reserve in the amount of, is it $3,476.99 to be funded with monies from 2019-2020 unappropriated fund balance. Can I have a motion, please?
I'll make the motion.
Dave, second. And Ron?
Yeah.
All right. Any questions?
Yeah, just quickly, is this is the amount, the anticipated amount based upon property assessment grievances that are being resolved over the summer?
Yes, so in your board packets, there were some attachments that detailed the amounts of these refunds. So these were decisions that came now from Columbia County that we have to pay out. So this tax cert account will likely be amended in the future. Eileen and I are going to work on reconciling the remaining years. You may recall we have 3 years of tax cert accounts open at any one time. So we're starting to look at those files, but these are refunds that needed to be processed now.
Okay, that's what I thought. So it's a reserve fund that's actually immediately being used.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for clarifying that.
Sure.
Anybody else? All right, all in favor? Joe, Linda? Thank you. We have amendment to employment rates. So be it resolved that the superintendent of schools recommends to the Board of Education to establish the following employment rates for the 2020-2021 fiscal year as follows. So I'm obviously not going to read all of those. You can look through them, but did you not say, Neil, that these were dictated by the state?
Yes. I don't know, Sybil, you want to add anything? These are minimum amounts. The state had raised the hourly rate.
Correct.
Minimum that you can make per hour. So we were just reflecting that in our current practices.
Okay, so can I have a motion, please?
I'll make the motion.
Dave, second.
Second.
Heidi? Okay, any questions?
So these are state mandated rates, that's correct?
Well, yes, it's the law now.
These are the New York State minimum wage rate changes.
So if there's state laws, I'm just curious, why do we vote on it? If it's a law, don't we just implement the law? I mean, it's just a technicality. I guess it doesn't really matter.
Right.
Just
You
curious.
You authorize employment rates, so, and we publish them. So we always have the board act on them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. We don't have an executive session at this time. And do we have additional items to discuss? I don't have any. Do you?
I do not.
Okay. Does anybody else have any additional items to discuss? All right, we're moving on to adjournment. Can I have a motion for adjournment, Linda? I'm sorry.
Bonnie?
I just have a question, if I may. I
Yes,
apologize for holding it up.
that's okay.
Neil, and I know we've already approved the, what do you call it? The acceptance agenda. You had talked about putting an ad out in the paper to let the public know that we had substitute openings. I'm just wondering if that had occurred.
So it did not occur. The information we got back was extremely expensive to put advertisements in the classifieds. I have that information. I was trying to negotiate and then was going to talk with the towns and their listservs to get a substitute announcement out to them through the Columbia County Board of Supervisors. So that's what some of the other schools have done and have found it beneficial and much cheaper.
If I can add to that, we did have a Facebook post that went out and we are approving 13 substitutes this month. So I think we're off to a good start with that.
That is a good start.
Well, I know that we lowered the 4-year college requirement, or didn't formally lower it, but we had a standard, and now it's 2 years, which is better than no years, which was something else you were also talking about. So I'm glad to see that we're at least requiring the 2 years of college.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So vote for adjournment, because I know that's your motion usually. Can I have a second? Ron? All in favor? All right, good night, everyone. Thank you.
Night.
That was a